Well, I think we have to learn the right lessons from what happened in the UK. That is clearly that some media organizations overstepped their role as participating in a free press, but really engaged in what I think will probably amount to criminal activity. And so what we need to do is look at the laws we have, which prohibit, access to people's private communications and protect their privacy, and implement them. And the same goes for a free press. It's essential that we preserve a free press, a pluralist media landscape in Europe, but we don't necessarily need new rules. Let's begin by implementing the ones we have appropriately. Well, the EU in the world needs to play a role when it comes to trade, but also when it comes to the defense of fundamental rights and freedoms. And especially when we look at the uprisings in North Africa, for example, the fallout in a country like Egypt, that's very important for us as a southern neighbor. It is important that the EU steps up its effort and speaks out clearly and strongly when fundamental rights are compromised. And especially when it comes to censorship, whether it's traditional media or the internet, we're very concerned of what happens in Egypt. And perhaps especially when we face the most serious challenges, the EU should show its leadership in the world and act as a community of values. And we should reach out to a young generation that looks towards the EU for recognition of their universal rights, including the right to freely express, press freedom, access to information, and this should also apply online. Where for a long time the open internet has just organically developed, slowly and surely we see governments getting increasingly nervous about the power that is leaking away from them to companies, but also to individuals. And we see an increased ambition and efforts to clamp down and to bring back internet under a country's territorial control. And so the fight and sort of political infighting around the future of the internet and internet governance has really begun. When we look at the United Nations, which has a number of platforms dealing with internet governance, proposals by countries like China or Russia show a very restrictive direction, very restrictive actions. And although the UN in and of itself won't prevent this kind of restriction, countries already do what they want, mass censorship in China, the use of deep packet inspections that's authorized in Russia. I still believe that the EU needs to resist granting a UN mandate to such restrictive measures, and that we should enforce and ensure that people appreciate the open internet and what it brings for economic development as well as for human rights. Well, we're very, very concerned about what's happening in Hungary. The Liberal group, of which I'm a member here in the European Parliament, and our President, Guy Verhofstadt, has spoken out very, very strongly. We're seeking the strongest measures to revoke the authoritarian laws that Viktor Orban has imposed in Hungary. And basically what we see is that there's a power grab going on, and that with a majority in the Parliament, all kinds of rules are changed, and all kinds of government bodies that ought to be independent are becoming politicized. And especially when it comes to the media, which should have a check on power, whether it's online or offline, we're very worried about what the government in Hungary is doing to restrict media freedom. It's arbitrarily using licenses and other rules to restrict critical media, and we all know from history where that kind of authoritarian tendency leads, and we're very worried, and I think that the Hungarian government needs to get in line with European values or otherwise face the strictest consequences. If you open any newspaper or watch the evening news, the word cyber seems to be everywhere. We hear about cyber terrorists, cyber security, cyber warfare, cyber criminals, cyber threats, and it almost seems like cyber is everywhere, and we hear of discussions of bringing the military into the cyber domain or looking for defense in the cyber domain, and I think we have to be careful that we don't treat cyber as a different space, something outside of ordinary society, outside of everyday life. If you look at the impact of technologies, the role internet plays, people use internet for doing business, for accessing information, for moving around in traffic, and for many, many other purposes. And so if you want a resilient society that can deal with the freedoms and the opportunities that new technologies bring, as well as one that can be resisting against threats to trust and security, it needs to involve all of society. And so I think we have to educate people, both in government and citizens, to make wise decisions, to be aware of the real risks, but we shouldn't let hypes and industry-based studies about threats and terrorism let dominate the policy discussions, because if we compromise a lot of our freedoms for alleged threats, this could be equally damaging, and we've learned lessons from the war on terror, and we shouldn't do the same with the war on cyber terror.